Imagine this for a second. You're way up there, cruising 35,000 feet. Everything's smooth, sky's clear, cabin's quiet, just a normal flight.
Mm-hmm.
And then, well, something starts to feel off. The controls get sluggish. Maybe an alarm starts blaring out of nowhere. And you realize you're heading into one of aviation's trickiest, most misunderstood situations. It's not an engine failure, no fire. You're approaching a stall. Welcome to the deep dive. That scenario, kind of chilling, right? It leads us straight into what we're tackling today, the aircraft stall. It's something most of us think we get, but our source today, Captain Ashutosh Chopra's The Commercial Pilot's Handbook, specifically Chapter-13, Stall and Recovery, well, it's going to challenge some of those ideas. Our mission is to unpack the real deal, debunk some myths, using real-world pilot wisdom. Okay, ready to dive in?
Yeah, and what's really striking right off the bat is how different a stall is from the common perception. It's really not just about flying too slowly. The absolute core concept, and this is crucial for you to really get, is the angle of attack, the AOA.
AOA, angle of attack. Yeah, for the longest time, I definitely thought a stall meant the plane was just going too slow. And I bet a lot of you listening did too. But Captain Chopra basically flips that idea. He means that an aircraft can stall at any speed, even high speed. That's kind of the mind bender, isn't it? It all comes down to that critical stalling angle.
Precisely. That's the aerodynamic truth. The AOA, which is the angle between the relative airflow hitting the wing and the wing's chord line, that imaginary line from the leading edge to the trailing edge. As that angle increases, the air flowing over the top surface starts to separate. It gets turbulent, breaks away. And when that separation becomes substantial enough, you get a big loss of lift. That's the stall. And that's why you can stall pulling up sharply, even at high speed or, say, in a steep turn. It's purely about hitting that critical angle, whatever the airspeed might be.
That really is the counterintuitive piece that makes you rethink things. So it's the angle, not inherently the speed. And Captain Chopra also brings in other factors, right? Like load factor, where the center of gravity is, even how much engine thrust you have. They all play a part in how and when an aircraft might stall. It just adds layers of complexity.
Absolutely it does, which leads naturally into one of the really interesting points the captain raises, how pilots actually detect an impending stall, especially given a surprising equipment issue.
Okay, so what's that surprising thing Captain Chopra points out about detection? Something about the instrumentation.
Yeah, it's the lack of a direct angle of attack indicator on the main panel in many, maybe even most civilian aircraft. It seems like such a key piece of information, but pilots often don't have it displayed directly in front of them. So without that direct AOA reading, pilots have to be incredibly attuned to secondary signals. These are the silent alarms that give you a heads up before things get critical.
Okay, no direct AOA gauge for many. So what are these whispers, these secondary clues pilots are trained to listen for or feel for before a stall actually happens?
Well, first there's the physical feedback. You get vibration, actual shaking caused by that separating airflow over the wing. Pilots can also feel it through the control column. That's the turbulent air hitting the tailplane. It's called buffet. And Captain Chopra makes a really important point here. This buffet can be way more intense, much more disorienting in a real aircraft compared to what you experience in a simulator. It's a real physical jolt.
Oh, interesting. So the sim might not fully prepare you for that gut feeling. What about what they see on the instruments?
Yeah, instrument clues are vital too. Things like watching the airspeed decay, seeing it drop off, and noticing the nose attitude pitching up, especially if you're trying to maintain level flight. And then you have the automated warnings in modern jets. Things like pitch limit indicators, PLIs, buffet alerts, and stick shakers.
Stick shakers. They always sound so dramatic in incident reports. What's their actual function? Is it like the final warning?
Actually, no, not the final one. The stick shaker activates before the stall. It's designed to warn you about an impending stall. And this is key. It means you still have a flyable margin. Recovery needs to start right then, but the plane is still controllable. The PLIs also give you a safety margin. They show you how close you are to the limit, giving you time to react before you actually hit the full stall angle. They're all about early warning.
Okay, so these are all warnings before the stall fully develops, giving the pilot a chance. What about a fully developed stall then? How does that feel different? What are the signs?
A fully developed stall, well, that's characterized by a serious lack of pitch authority. You find you just can't bring the nose up or keep it up, you can't maintain level flight, or maybe you can't even recover from a nose-down pitch. You might also experience a significant loss of roll control. It becomes much harder to keep the wings level. It's a much more dangerous state because recovery is significantly harder.
Definitely want to avoid that. And that difficulty, that danger, brings us to something Captain Chopra calls the startle factor. This sounds like more than just being surprised.
Oh, it absolutely is. Startle factor isn't just a jump scare. It's this profound state of low situational awareness. It can happen when your attention is diverted, or maybe you're operating with thinner safety margins than usual, especially as you approach a stall. It's like your brain just freezes for a second, or longer. Your decision-making breaks down right when things get loud and chaotic. Captain Chopra is really highlighting that even with all the tech, the human mind under intense pressure is often the biggest variable.
And it's rarely just one single thing causing it, right? He talks about combinations amplifying it.
That's exactly right. He stresses how simultaneous events can pile on. Imagine the stick shaker going off, plus an autopilot disconnect warning klaxon, plus suddenly finding the aircraft is out of trim, maybe you're in cloud with no visual reference, add some wind shear. It all just stacks up, adding to the confusion and the startle.
He paints a really vivid, almost nightmare scenario, doesn't he? A tired pilot, flying at night, heavy rain, doing a complex non-precision approach, so relying totally on instruments. And they maybe don't notice the auto throttle has disconnected the system managing engine power, and then suddenly, bam, the stick shaker starts rattling.
Yeah, in that kind of perfect storm, the startle factor can cause a real delay in recognizing the stall and starting the recovery. Or worse, lead to mishandling the controls, making the situation even more serious. It forces a really critical question for pilots. What's the absolute priority when everything is happening at once?
That's a scary thought. You're fighting a stall, stick shaker going crazy, but maybe the ground proximity warning system starts yelling, "Terrain! Terrain!" What do you do first?
The guidance from the handbook is stark and absolutely critical. Unstalling the aircraft takes priority over a terrain warning if the aircraft is unflyable. Because, as the captain puts it, and it's quite blunt, if the aircraft is unflyable, how are you going to avoid the terrain anyway?
It's a really sobering point about fundamental airmanship. First, fly the airplane. Wow. That really hits home. Fly the airplane first. And stalls themselves can be triggered in ways that feed right into this startle factor. He mentions things like distractions at low altitude.
Right, or maybe an autopilot disconnects unexpectedly during high-altitude cruise. Up there, the margins between normal speed and stall speed can be much smaller, and engine response is slower. Mishandling in bad weather, not recognizing ice building up on the airframe, using the wrong flap settings. All these can lead to a stall and increase that potential for startle. It's not always about aggressive maneuvering. Sometimes it's subtle.
It sounds like it really emphasizes the need for vigilance.
It does. And he also brings up the importance of feel, even in modern cockpits. Good habits, tactile feedback. Like, he suggests after descending with the engines at idle, your hand should instinctively be resting on the thrust levers, feeling for them to move forward as you level off if they don't move.
You immediately know something's wrong, just by feel.
Exactly. That physical connection gives you instant feedback. He even speculates that the lack of this kind of tactile feedback, because some modern autothrottles don't physically move the levers, might have played a role in the B737 stall near Amsterdam back in 2009. Automation is great, but it can sometimes remove those crucial sensory inputs.
And the startle factor itself can cause more problems during the recovery, right? Like pilots overreacting.
Absolutely. There's a real danger that when startled, a pilot's control inputs might become jerky, too large, or uncoordinated. Captain Chopra really hammers this. You have to consciously guard against it. Inputs need to be deliberate, smooth, progressive, even when your heart is pounding. Panicking and yanking the controls is often the worst thing you can do.
So the human in the cockpit remains absolutely critical, even with all the automation. Which leads us nicely into talking about automation itself, teamwork, and the big differences between training in a simulator and the real thing.
Yeah, this is interesting. You know, these modern glass flight decks with the flight directors, the FDs, those magenta command bars on the screen. When the autopilot is engaged, the FDs tend to stay nicely centered, showing the automation is following the programmed path. But this can actually mask the fact that the aircraft itself might be getting into a dangerously high nose-up attitude, approaching a stall.
So the automation is trying so hard to do its job, it kind of hides the developing problem from the pilot if they're just watching the command bars.
Pretty much, yeah. It underscores why pilots must understand the actual performance, the combinations of altitude, speed, aircraft configuration, thrust settings for their specific aircraft, independent of just following the magenta lines. You need that deeper awareness.
And this ties into crew resource management, CRM, the teamwork aspect.
Definitely. Startle can cause a total breakdown in CRM. Communication stops. Situational awareness across the crew just vanishes. In really demanding situations, the pilot monitoring the PM, the one not flying, has a massive role. They need to be extra vigilant, watching for signs of an impending stall, ready to call it out clearly to the pilot flying, the PF. And conversely, the PF needs to be able to say, hey, I'm overloaded here, watch my speed, watch my attitude closely. It's got to be a constant loop of communication and backup.
But then there's the simulator versus reality gap. This sounds like a really significant issue for stall training.
It's a huge gap, yeah. Very, very few pilots, likely only test pilots, have ever experienced a genuine stall in a large transport aircraft. Most rely entirely on simulators. And the problem is simulators, well, they often struggle to accurately replicate asymmetries, especially in roll during a stall. They tend to just pitch down neatly.
So in a real stall, if one wing drops suddenly and aggressively, that might be completely unexpected based on simulator training.
Yeah.
Which could feed right back into that startle factor.
Yeah, precisely. Also, the rate at which a stall develops affects how intense the buffet feels. Simulators might not get that right either. Captain Chopra cites test pilots saying real-world buffet can be incredibly violent, like shaking so hard it's difficult to even read the instruments, and then you layer on top potential real-world complications. System failures, maybe slats or flaps jam, an elevator or rudder problem, or external events like a bird strike damaging a wing leading edge, or unexpected icing. These can all drastically change how the aircraft stalls and behaves. The big takeaway here is that pilots need immense flexibility and adaptability, because real stalls rarely follow the neat simulator script.
That's a very sobering thought. The real world doesn't stick to the training syllabus. Okay, so let's say despite everything, you find yourself in a stall, or an impending one. What's the absolute non-negotiable recovery procedure? Captain Chopra emphasizes extreme precision here.
He really does. The first absolute rule is you must follow the specific recovery actions laid out in your aircraft's flight manual. They're tailored to that specific type. But we can break down the general sequence. The first phase is really about orientate and take control. You have to quickly assess your attitude, look at the PLI, check your speed, confirm you are actually in or approaching a stall, no knee-jerk reactions, especially way up high. And then critically, you firmly take the control column and you must disconnect both the autopilot and the autothrottle. Immediately. No ambiguity. You are flying the plane manually now.
Okay, step one. Confirm the problem, turn off the automation, grab the controls firmly. What's the main physical action then? It's all about reducing that angle of attack, right?
Exactly right. Phase 2 is unstall the aircraft. This means applying deliberate, smooth, and progressive nose-down elevator pressure. Push the control column forward. You might also need to use nose-down trim, especially if the autopilot was fighting the stall, and trim the nose way up before disconnecting. You keep applying that nose-down input until the buffet stops and the stick shaker quits. You are actively lowering the nose to get the wing flying again.
That's a key detail, realizing you might have to fight against trim the autopilot put in. What if a wing starts to drop while you're pushing the nose down? What's the priority?
Yes. Very important point. If a wing drops, the instruction is resist roll inputs initially. Focus all your effort on that primary nose-down elevator command. Don't instinctively try to level the wings with aileron with side-to-side stick input, especially if you're startled. Get the nose down first. That will restore lift and eventually roll control. And while doing this, you need to keep your eyes scanning, monitor the PLI on your primary flight display, your PFD. Aim to keep a buffer, say a minimum 3 to 5 degree margin below the PLI indication to prevent pitching right back into a secondary stall.
Wow, another counterintuitive thing. Ignore the roll, focus on pitch down. Okay, so nose is down, buffet stopped, stick shaker quiet. Now can you add power?
Carefully, and not too soon. This leads to phase 3. Energy recovery and reestablishing control. Once you've definitely got that nose-down pitch established and you're preventing it from pitching back up, then you can progressively add thrust. Adding thrust helps build speed back up and minimizes how much altitude you lose, which is obviously critical if you're near the ground. But, and this is Captain Chopra's huge warning, his no powering out rule, you have to be careful. Ramming the thrust levers forward suddenly, especially at low altitudes or if the aircraft is light or has an aft center of gravity, that can cause an uncontrollable pitch up right back towards a stall. So the sequence is non-negotiable. Lower the nose first, break the stall, then smoothly add thrust. Do not try to use engine power alone to fly out of a stall. That applies whether it's an impending stall or a fully developed one.
Got it. Lower the nose, then power. Critical sequence. What about things like speed brakes or spoilers if they were out?
Retract them immediately. Captain Chopra says this should basically be a muscle memory reflex anytime you need to accelerate quickly. Retracting spoilers cleans up the wing, recovers lift, helps the plane speed up faster, and improves your stall margin. Then you return to safe flight. Once you've got a safe flying speed back, Captain Chopra often mentions the flaps-up speed as a good target for a clean wing, you initiate a smooth, progressive, shallow, nose-up recovery pitch, but always keeping that 3 to 5 degree separation from the PLI to be safe.
Okay, so you've recovered control, you're climbing away safely. What happens next?
That's the final phase. Post-recovery actions and sustained awareness. If this happened on approach, you absolutely discontinue it. Go around. Don't try to salvage the landing. If it was part of a more extreme situation, a jet upset, you'd transition into the specific upset recovery procedures. You'd only re-engage the autopilot and auto-throttle once you're at a safe altitude and stable. And crucially, you need to reorientate yourself. Where are you? What's the terrain? You have to actively work to reduce that lingering startle factor through good crew resource management. The pilot monitoring needs to be checking the pilot flying's actions, calling out altitudes, speeds, and keeping that vital awareness of terrain.
That entire sequence sounds incredibly demanding, especially thinking about doing it when you might be tired, the weather's bad, maybe you're close to mountains.
It is immensely demanding, and that's why the captain really emphasizes that consistent mental rehearsal, visualization, diligent practice in the simulator, even with its limitations, and just maintaining heightened attention and discipline in the cockpit are absolutely essential. You have to be prepared.
What an incredible deep dive. We've covered so much ground, from the fundamental misunderstanding about speed versus angle of attack, to the subtle warnings, the danger of the startle factor, and that incredibly precise recovery sequence. The main things I'm really taking away are, well, first, just how counterintuitive stalls can be happening at any speed. Second, the absolute reliance on those secondary warnings and the pilot's interpretation. Third, that insidious startle factor and how it compromises everything. And finally, the absolute discipline needed for that recovery, nose down first.
And perhaps the most powerful overarching thought, the final point from Captain Chopra's work that really sticks with me, is his conclusion. He basically says that you're only likely to actually reach a fully stalled state if you allow your situational awareness to become drastically reduced or through gross mishandling of the aircraft. And crucially, he adds, both of those things, maintaining awareness and avoiding gross mishandling, are ultimately within the pilot's control.
That's a really profound final thought, isn't it? It puts the ultimate responsibility, even with complex machines, squarely back on the human operator. So, thinking beyond the cockpit then, what is this insight about maintaining control, maintaining awareness, avoiding that gross mishandling under pressure? What does that imply for other high-stakes situations? How does that apply maybe in your own life or profession when you're faced with overwhelming information or sudden crises? What stands out to you from this deep dive today?